Hello and welcome to History in 7 Facts, the show in which we explore some interesting episodes of humanity's past. Check out this playlist to watch the entire series, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. One of the most controversial figures of the Renaissance was Pope Alexander VI. There was nothing holy about him. In fact, you could say he was the opposite of holiness. But history has a strange way of distorting reality, and in the end, his daughter, Lucrezia Borgia, was the one branded as an evil person, despite her being just a pawn in her father's games. Lucrezia entered the history books as a murderer and an image of debauchery. But in fact, there was no evidence to suggest she was anything of a sort. So how did she end up getting blamed for her family's sins? Since the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church was the most powerful political entity on the planet. The Vatican was the seat of the supreme power of Western Christianity or Catholicism, who collected and imposed taxes, was selling indulgences that forgave sins, and was in fact administering profitable businesses throughout Europe. The Pope itself also had a considerable amount of wealth. It was also required of him to be first and foremost a cunning politician. Alexander VI, born Rodrigo Borgia, was such a man. The Borgia family was originally from Valencia, but moved to Rome in the 15th century. Cardinal Rodrigo bought and schemed his way into Vatican, and in 1492 he became Pope Alexander VI. He became one of the most controversial popes in history, a lustful, deceiving and brutal leader. In 1492, Rodrigo's daughter was only 12 years old, but she was already a pawn to be used for political purposes. She was already promised for marriage twice, but ultimately was married to someone else at age 13. Her father married her to Giovanni Sforza, a member of a powerful Milanese family. The wedding was an extravagant one. A procession of 500 women, led by the Pope's mistress, Giulia Farnese, conducted the couple on the streets. While the Sforza family was certainly impressed, others weren't. But this was only one of the many excesses of the Pope that outraged Rome. Pretty soon the Pope was dissatisfied by the alliance with the Sforza family, so he simply annulled his daughter's marriage. He legitimized the annulment by claiming that the marriage was not consummated. Rodrigo then forced his son-in-law to sign a declaration of impotence. Afraid of the Pope's wrath, Giovanni signed the declaration, but it was a false one. The guy already had a daughter from a previous marriage, and Lucrezia was at the time 17 years old, so he had no reasons to abstain from intimate relations with his wife. But it didn't matter. The Pope even arranged for Lucrezia to be examined and declared a virgin. Humiliated and angry, Giovanni started a rumor that would stay with his ex-wife for generations to come. He said the real reason why the Pope wanted the annulment was because he and Cesare, his son, indulged in incestuous relations with Lucrezia. At this point, any young woman would have been humiliated and hurt, but that didn't matter to Rodrigo. He again married her to Duke Alfonso of Aragon to ally himself with the powerful lords of Naples. But 2 years later, he managed to secure an alliance with King Louis XII of France, who was an enemy of Naples. Lucrezia's marriage was once again a problem for the Pope. You may suspect what happened next, but you don't have to guess. We know exactly what happened from the journals of Johannes Burchard, the Pope's master of ceremonies. In the year 1500, Lucrezia's brother Cesare ordered the killing of Alfonso de Aragon. He was ambushed in St. Peter's Square, but survived the attack. Because he refused to die from his injuries, he was strangled in his own bed. Lucrezia was devastated and retreated to her castle to mourn her husband. By this time, Lucrezia was viewed as responsible for the violence, schemes and machinations of her family. The rival families from Naples and Venice considered her responsible for Alfonso's death. Her reputation was indeed ruined, and the chronicles of the time were harsh with the words. Girolamo Priuli branded Lucrezia as the biggest whore of Rome. Jacopo Sannazaro compared her with Thais, a prostitute from the court of Alexander the Great, and accused her in his writings of incest with both her father and her brother. All of this hatred was directed towards her, but keep in mind that there is no evidence to suggest she had anything to do with the wrongdoings of her family. Lucrezia's reputation endured for the centuries to come, and her alleged sexual desires became a source for many writers. She also gained the reputation of a poisoner, even though the murders of the Vatican had nothing to do with her. At the time, both Cesare and Rodrigo were rumored to be behind many poisonings. Chroniclers noted that the two simply ordered their cooks to put poison into the food of anyone they considered to be their rivals. Cesare was also a violent man. He was even suspected of murdering his own brother Juan because he was his father's favorite. His body was found on the shores of the Tiber River, a fate many of Cesare's rivals shared. Another victim was the Pope's chamberlain, Pedro Calderon, who presumably slept with Lucrezia during the prolonged process of the annulment of her first marriage. He left her pregnant, but even when it showed, she was still declared a virgin. Pedro Calderon's body was also found later on the shores of the Tiber, and the child was hidden from the public for years. Later, the child was presumed to be the fruit of Lucrezia and Rodrigo's unnatural relationship. One of the Pope's most famous victims was Girolamo Savonarola, a vital precursor of the Church's Reformation. He dared to defy the Pope more than once, so he was arrested and hanged and burned in the public square of Florence. With a tarnished reputation, arranging a third marriage for Lucrezia was no easy task. Cesare was trying to seal an alliance with Alfonso d'Este, Duke of Ferrara, but the family was well aware of the scandals surrounding the Borgia clan. Bravely, Lucrezia presented herself to the Duke's ambassador, Johannes Lucas, who was charmed by her personality. She described her as being nothing like what the rumors said. She was an intelligent, gracious and religious young woman that clearly had nothing to do with the sinister schemes of her family. Ultimately, the cancellation of the Pope's taxes and a sizable dowry were probably more convincing than Lucrezia's personality, so Alfonso married her in 1502. She moved to Ferrara, where she lived out the rest of her life as a loving wife and mother and as a patron of poetry and the arts. Far away from the filth of Rome and the Vatican, Lucrezia managed to blend in with her new family. She had 7 children with Alfonso and was a devout Christian. Even though all her sufferings were caused by her brother and father, she was still devastated by the death of Cesare. Lucrezia died in 1519 while giving birth. At the time, she was remembered as a devout Christian, a caring mother, and a generous human being. But over the years, her reputation as a harlot was what endured. The scandals and struggles for power of the Borgia family inspired many writers, and Lucrezia's real personality was sacrificed for the sake of the sensational. Victor Hugo portrayed her as a scandalous woman who flirted with her illegitimate son and poisoned her friends out of revenge. Alexandre Dumas wrote about Lucrezia that she had a wild imagination, was an unfaithful woman by nature, and both the daughter and mistress of her father, while also engaging in intimate relations with her brother. For Dumas and many other writers, she was the most diabolical of the three. While she was alive, she was never accused of murder, nor was she suspected of such deeds. But throughout the years, it was Lucrezia who had to pay for the sins and terrible acts of her family. Incredibly, while Pope Alexander VI went down in history as a corrupt and brutal leader, it was still her innocent daughter that became a much more diabolical figure. Thank you for watching this episode of 7 Facts. I hope this was interesting and informative, and maybe it even inspired you to look into it further on your own. If you like this video, please thumbs up and subscribe. And while you're downstairs, let me know what you think about this video. Please consider visiting my Patreon page and become a patron. The link is in the description. I hope to see you next time. Bye.